All right, today, guys, we're going to be working on repairing this turbocharger oil drain. This is something I've let go for a while, so you can see there's a lot of oil dried up on here. And the main reason is, if you zoom in here, you can see there's a little 10mm bolt down there, and there's another one on the other side that holds this drain tube. And the reason for putting this off is because this is, heated up as part of the exhaust, as part of how the turbocharger works. The chance of this little guy breaking off were non-zero, let's just say that. And so I put this off. But I got to deal with this because it's making a mess on the driveway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this oil all off and hope that that actually helped my problem. And we're going to soak it in some PB Blaster, and we're going to try and attack removing these bolts. All right, guys, we've let this soak in PB Blaster. I've done it a couple of times. I've let it soak overnight. I've gone in here with a wire brush and cleaned up a lot of the debris. And it actually looks pretty good. So I'm thinking we're not going to have any trouble at all. I'm down here with a 10mm ratchet wrench, and I'm coming up from the front, as you can see, right underneath the air intake. And I'm thinking that we might be able to have enough clearance to get this guy. You want to make sure you're doing, kind of like a lefty, counterclockwise upside down to loosen it. Just make sure you're in the right direction. I'll show you when I get back up here. So there's just enough room, if I can get situated, where you got enough leverage to push your arm against the battery and give it just a little bit of force. There we go. All right, so we lucked out on this guy so far. Just going to kind of slowly get him out here, and then we'll be able to see if we were really in any danger with corrosion on this guy. Get him out to at least enough to get by hand, like there. Should be enough. All right, so let me pull this out for a second and show you, right? So just make sure, when you're up on top, of course, you're going to do clockwise, righty-tighty. You want to make sure you're going left, counterclockwise to loosen. So when you end up being underneath, you're actually going to be going like this to get it off. All right, so yeah, just a small ratchet and a 10mm socket coming in right from here between the battery and underneath is just fine for accessing this first guy, at least to get him as far as we just did. So now we got to do the other side, and I'm going to have to move the light and get better situated for you, so we'll do that, and then we'll pick up and do the same thing on the other side. Here is the bolt that we took out of the side that faces, the passenger fender. And so it actually looks in really good condition. I'm actually surprised, which is basically, hey, you should have changed this a year or two ago. But I'm guessing that the oil has protected it and kept it from corroding very badly. What you're going to find out on the inboard bolt that we're going to go after now is we can't get a ratchet wrench in there because the amount of space that you have between the fastener and the drain tube is just beyond the width of the socket, and so the head of the ratchet's too thick. So you actually can't get this in there. And you can't get a regular wrench in there because the turbocharger piece here on the bottom part of where the turbine is in your way. So if you try to come up from this, you got about, that much space between you and the head of the fastener. So you can't get this guy in there. And you can't get him in from this angle because you've got the heat shield for the turbocharger and the crossover, and I don't want to go bother taking all that off because these bolts here are probably at a much higher probability of breaking off because they're closer to the part that's directly heated by the exhaust, and I just don't want to expand the mission here. And this small 10mm ratchet tool I've got, that would be a good fit, but he's too long. But I did find this guy. I got a little stubby 10mm, and that turned out to be the ticket. So we're going to get that bolt off using one of these 10mm stubby kind of wrenches that's only about maybe 3.5 inches long end to end here. So if we go over on this side, I'm going to come in the same way I did before and bring my hand in under here. And then I'm going to get it positioned right there. So right here's our bolt, and we've got our ratchet positioned here. You've got just enough room to kind of pull on this guy. And fortunately, it's coming off just as easy as the other one did. I don't know if you can see that bolt turning there, but he's coming off. And so we're going to work him off. Now, I'm not actually going to remove him, so let me take this tool off for a second. Yeah. He's kind of got himself stuck on there. There he goes. All right. So you can see where my finger is here. What you'll notice is this is slotted. And so you actually don't have to remove this bolt normally. You just loosen it, and you can get this drain tube to slot out. But this drain tube right here, making sure you can see here. So this drain tube here is going down into this heat shield that kind of guides it. And so we don't want to take that off either. So we're going to leave this on here for this, but I'm just showing you normally this is slotted so that you could slide it out if you didn't have the shield in the way. But the tube goes down through this heat shield and pops up down below the passenger side front of the engine block where it mounts to a flange. So I'm going to leave this bolt attached here, and I'll show you why when we get underneath the truck. All right, guys, we're down under the vehicle, and what I'm pointing at is on the passenger side lower front of the engine block. You're going to have this flange here. And this flange is mounted to where in the old 6.2 liter diesels, I guess maybe before 1995 or maybe before 96, I can't remember for sure, that you had a mechanical fuel pump here. And this is a very similar mounting plate to a small block Chevy fuel pump. And what you've got is you got these two smaller bolts on the bottom. You got these, they're actually metric. I'll tell you what the size they are when I remember. And then you've got these two English SAE type bolts at the top. And then you got this piece of the tube that flows the oil back from the turbo into the block. And then you've got this piece of rubber hose that's oil resistant. It's a special kind of hose, and it's held on by two spring clamps, or excuse me, screw clamps. There's one here, and there's one way up there. And the one at the top is what's holding the bottom of the tube we were just talking about earlier. So that tube comes down through that heat shield, inserts into this top part of this rubber hose, and then that top clamp holds it. And then the bottom of the hose goes into the pipe that's attached to this flange, and then that clamp holds it there. And then it's mounted on with these 4 bolts that just basically are reusing the mounting pattern for the mechanical fuel pump. And so the oil that drains out of the turbo just flows right back into the block. So I'm going to clean this up, and I'm not going to be able to, film this while being up in here. But I will show you, the sizes of the fasteners and the tool I'm going to use to get these off, and then we'll do it. I'll get it all apart, and we'll show you what it looks like taken apart. All right, guys, just taking a quick look at the service manual. This is for a 98, but it's going to be the same for all these 96, 98, 99, and then the carryover models from 2000 and 2001 that have an old body style. If we take a look at the parts explosion for this, what we just looked at, right? So we were originally looking at these bolts that attach this pipe to the bottom of the turbocharger. And this gasket in there is what we're going to replace up on that top part. And then that comes down, and we just looked at that hose, and it has 2 clamps, 2 screw clamps holding it, one holding the bottom of the drain pipe, and then the hose also then has another clamp holding the piece of hose to the pipe that's attached to the flange. And then we've got 4 bolts on there. The bottom 2 are 10 millimeter. The top 2 I'll look up for you and get soon. And then there's another gasket, which is just a standard, small block Chevy mechanical fuel pump gasket. And we're going to replace that gasket too. So by replacing this gasket to the block, this gasket between the drain pipe and the turbocharger, and this old piece of rubber hose, I'm thinking we're going to be able to get rid of these leaks, because it's leaking in both places. You got oil leaking up here at the top part of the pipe, and then as you saw underneath, we've got oil that's running past the hose and running down the outside of the pipe. So it's not leaking at this gasket to the block, but we're going to replace it anyway. But it's leaking from this hose. So let me show you the parts that we're going to be using for this, and then we'll go back underneath and get started removing the flange. All right, guys, so for this hose component, which is here, right? So we've got a new piece of hose in here. It comes already pre-cut and measured for you from GM. And that's going to be a part 101 14660. So that gives you the hose piece that's here. Now the other two parts, they don't sell individually. Usually the dealer will have to buy several of them. And what you've got here is, this is the gasket for the flange that goes up against the engine block. And for those of you that know what a Chevy gasser block fuel pump, a mechanical fuel pump gasket looks like, you recognize this. And then here's the gasket that goes at the top of the drain pipe where it mounts to the turbocharger. And so I had to take these individually when I picked them up. And the gasket that goes on the turbo is 14098,654. And then the gasket that goes on the lower flange to the block is 125,60223. And I'll run a link in the description where you might search for these parts on eBay, for example. And so basically the gist of how this whole setup operates is, you've got oil coming in through this pipe, going into the top of this piece of the turbocharger, and it keeps that turbine shaft lubricated, and then it runs out the bottom into that drain pipe that we just loosened these bolts on earlier. It runs down that pipe, through that hose, through that flange plate, and back into the block for recirculation. So that's the entire flow here. So sometimes you might get a leak at the top here. This particular vehicle doesn't. The leak is happening down below. And so getting these two gaskets changed out and the hose changed out should solve that problem. We've got other leaks to chase, but those are other videos. So we'll come back when we're down back underneath. All right, guys, it's super cramped down here. But what I'm going to show you is how you go about getting this guy off. So the first thing I'm going to take off are these two clamps. And what I'm going to do is, right over here where the steering linkage is, I'm going to come up under here with a screwdriver. It's going to be our easiest way to kind of get these clamps off. And we're just going to release these two clamps. We're going to get them all the way off, because what we're going to need to do is get this hose out of the way, because as you can see, the hose is in the way of getting the clearance to get a socket on these larger bolts. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And you can reach both of these, just to kind of reach up here and show you. Again, it's kind of super pain to do this with one hand while I'm holding the camera with the other. But we can get both of these loosened up with the appropriate slotted screwdriver from this angle. Now this top one is a lot harder. It'll get easier when you can get two hands on it, but it can be done, right? Now, and so we'll take these two off, and then we'll come back and we'll continue on with what I plan to do here is get this hose pushed up out of the way so that we can then get access to the bolts. All right, guys, so this is where I'm at this point. I've gotten both of these spring clamps loosened with the screwdriver, and I've pushed them up to the top. You might have to have another tool up here with your left hand to keep the clamp from rotating all the way around so that you can get it all the way loose so you can move it up to this point. And at this point, what I've done is I've gotten it ready where I can easily move the rubber. So let me see if I can get a screwdriver back up in here and show you that. Very difficult to see and do this at the same time, but all right, let's try this again. You want to get this guy where he'll rotate so that you know that the seal between the pipe and the hose has been broken. Like that, right? So you can see that you're able to move the hose around. Then you know you're in good shape for this stage. Hopefully you guys can see that, because it is super cramped in here. All right, the next step we're going to do is we're going to need to get these two bolts at the bottom off. Try to hold this camera for you. And the ones we're after here at the bottom are these two 10 millimeters on the bottom here. And the way those can come off the most easiest I found is just a box end wrench. You can have enough room to get up there and get those two off. So that's how I'm going to take the two bottom ones off. So just continuing to go here, guys, just another view. And again, this is a box end wrench. It's got a little bit of a taper on the end of it. Right, so you're able to get this guy in here. And if you got one with a ratchet on it, it's even better. But that works really, really good to get these lower two off. Now, once you got them loosened, I found what works really good is to kind of turn yourself so you can stick your left hand up in here. And it's pretty easy to get your left hand up in here and then screw them the rest of the way out to remove them. All right, guys, to get these last two bolts off, I'm going to come up here with a 15mm box end wrench. You can get the end of it on these bolts and loosen them up. Now, like I said before, the hose is in the way, so you can't get a socket or anything on there anyway. I'm just trying to get the wrench up here with one greasy hand while I hold the camera for you guys. Sorry about that. Just need to get my hand on the back of it. There we go. All right. Yes, it is very, very cramped. But you get this guy in position, and then, as you can see, you can break the torque on this and loosen it. And with the torque loosened on both of these, the same treatment we did before. All right, so there's one. And get my hand back up in here again. You can kind of feel around where they are. As long as you get them loosened up, you can get them out. You might also, be able to just hold a socket in your hand if you can push it on past the rubber hose there. And here's the second one. All right, so at that point, both of the big bolts are off, both the little bolts are off, and the spring clamps are off. We can try to see if we can get it to release. I doubt it after this many years. Probably going to have to give it a little bit of a pounding first. But then this is the position I plan to come in on and pull it out, right, by laying on your side and coming in from this way. All right, guys, this is where we're at. So we've got all 4 of the bolts removed, and we've gotten both of the spring clamps loosened and pushed up above the rubber hose, and we've got the rubber hose loosened. Now we've just got to break the 20 years of petrification of the gasket between the flange and the block so that we can remove the flange and hose and pull it down along with the 2 clamps. So not going to be able to get you guys in for that, but I'll show you where we get to after we get it loosened up. All right, guys, I'm going to show you another view of where I was getting those bolts off while we actually pull the flange out, right? So we got the control arm here on the passenger side, and we're laying with our head facing towards this passenger side tire. That way you can get your hand to go up in here now that we've got this flange broke loose. Just need to go re-familiarize myself with where it is. There it is. And then we're going to pull it off the pipe. And this is why we left the other screw up on top of the drain pipe at the turbo. There we go. All right, and now we've got the whole assembly off here. So we've got our 2 clamps, we've got our hose, and we've got our flange removed. So now we're ready to clean this up and get ready to do the reinstall part. All right, guys, the way I got this to let go is I took a tool like this with a chisel tip on it. This happens to be like a crowbar device I have, but if you can get anything like that, a long chisel will do too. And you want to get it positioned right between the flange and the block. And then I just gave it a whack with a 3-pound hammer, and it came right off. So now what we're going to do is we're going to clean all these parts up. And I'm not necessarily going to film all that. We can see our tired old hose, the way it came off like that. It's very stiff. Not as flexible as it used to be. I don't see any cracks on it, but I'm pretty convinced that we had oil running down the side of it, and that was part of our problem. When I look on the inside at the gasket piece, there's no obvious problems with the gasket, so I don't think it was leaking at the flange. I think our leak was strictly blowback running down the side. So besides cleaning this guy up, so we're going to, not going to put him back to show quality, but we're going to get him all cleaned up before we start reassembling and get this gasket cleaned off of here, and then we're going to clean the side of the block where it mates. The next thing that we'll do after we get all this cleaned up and ready, we'll go back under the hood and we'll remove that last bolt because we want to clean both those bolts and inspect that one we left up there. We just left that one up there so that as we pulled on this, we had something secure it so we didn't get a lot of play in the drain pipe as we tried to pull this off. I wasn't sure how hard this thing was going to be holding, but I mean, I'm telling you, this thing is like rock hard and petrified. I cannot squeeze it very much at all. I'm sure if I tried to, it would crack. So definitely satisfied that that was the source of the leaks these last few years. We'll clean up these bolts too. Like I said, this guy here was a 15 millimeter. You know, it might have been an SAE type. I was not able to find torque values for any of these in any of the modern service manuals. You'd have to go all the way back to like 1990 or so, or 91 to find torque values for this. And I'll roll those at the bottom when we get ready to put things back on. Not that you'd be able to get a torque wrench up in where we were anyway with the four-wheel drive vehicle like this. You might have more luck if you don't have four-wheel drive, but with four-wheel drive, as you saw, there's like next to no clearance at all. So let me go ahead and start getting cleaned up here, and then we'll go pick it up where we're under the turbo and pull out that gas. All right, guys, we're just going to get in here and get this last screw that's holding the drain pipe onto the turbo with our little stubby 10 millimeter. Now we can see, even with it not even all the way off, we can move the pipe, right? But we're going to go ahead and take it off so we can clean it. At least we're going to get it as far as we can with this, and then we'll probably have to do the rest of the way by hand. These little stubby wrenches are a lifesaver in situations like this. Probably have gotten it as far as we can. Okay, take this guy out. We'll see if we can get it the rest of the way with our finger without dropping it. There he is. And then there's our pipe. We can come over to the other side. I think we can have a better view of our pipe laying right underneath there. All right, so now I'm going to have to kind of get under there. I'm not going to be able to have the camera get in there. I'm going to have to get in there and try to get the gasket off the top of that guy, and that'll be our last disassembly item. All right, guys, what I've done is I've taken all the fasteners and I'm letting them soak in mineral spirits. So that's cleaning things up very nicely, especially on these stainless steel clamps. We can actually read the Made in Canada part now. And then we also have all of our bolts in here. So I'm going to let them soak in here for about 30 minutes, including the fasteners we took off of the drain pipe attached to the turbocharger. So we've got everything in here. And then we also had the flange in here. He's looking very nice, just soaking in there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And we were able to take a gasket scraper and get the old gasket off, but there's still a few pieces on here. And what we'll do on that is we'll wire brush those chunks off as they soften up from the mineral spirits. Don't want to go too far. When you start seeing that the paint's coming off, you've probably gone far enough. But we want to get this thing really smooth so it doesn't leak. So we're going to continue soaking and wire brushing and soaking and wire brushing until we have the top here is all done, right? So it's nice and smooth. We want to get rid of any of the roughness that we see around this corner here, a little bit down here at the bottom in this corner, and right around the side. We want to get that all looking like the top that I've already done, just perfectly smooth. All right, guys, we're trying to get the grease and stuff cleaned up in between the flange and the turbocharger. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking my flashlight would cooperate with me. There. Just trying to take a paper towel that's just lightly dampened with mineral spirits and just pulling it through here over and over again. And as it turns out, we already got our gasket to crumble apart, so we didn't have a whole lot of problem with that. You can see we got pretty good clearance. Kind of come over here and zoom in here, right? We've got about 3/4 of an inch of clearance to work with on the pipe. So we're going to just keep going through there and cleaning that until we're ready to reinstall the gasket. Hey guys, we're at the time to reassemble everything. I'm just taking a little thin bead of this Permatex black silicone. Not because the service manual suggests it or anything, just because I think it'll help us hold the gasket in place while we're going to be doing the reassembly. Just to get it on there so it doesn't move around. Make sure it's centered. All right, so this guy is ready to go back up on top of the engine block. And then our hose can also get pre-positioned. It's on like that. And then we can get our clamps on here as well. All right, so we're ready to go back and put this guy underneath the truck. All right, guys, here we are underneath. We've got the flange mounting point all cleaned off. You can see up there in the middle, there's the drain pipe coming down from the turbo. So at this point, we're ready to reconnect our two assemblies. And again, you know, I can't really get the camera in here while we're doing that, but as soon as we can, we'll come back. All right, guys, you can see here what I've done is I've put the hose on the drain pipe, and I've just got the two clamps just snug enough so they don't fall off. And I've pushed this piece of rubber hose up against the little ridge that you might have noticed in the previous clip right before this. There's a little ridge at the bottom of that drain pipe. You push the hose up until it stops. Now we're ready to push on the assembly with our gasket. And we'll come back and get that on and show you that. All right, guys, you can see, zoom in here on this gasket. I'm going ahead. I've taken our black silicone and I've put it all around the top of this gasket. This is going to do two things. It's going to let it sit on the bottom of the turbo on the flange piece, as well as maybe help with the leak problems, because you notice the gasket does not have a cutout in it, so it needs to sit up under the turbo, and then the pipe comes up underneath it. So let's go ahead and install it. All right, guys, before I put this gasket on, because I'm not going to be able to get the camera in there while I do that, just here's another view of the pipe where we've got it dropped down and we've cleaned it off, and you can still see where the old gasket was on there, and that's okay. You know, what we're trying to do here is minimize the amount of disassembly that we're doing for this particular repair, and I think the approach we're taking here is going to work out just fine to stop the leaks. I'm going to put that black silicone not just on the side that touches the turbocharger flange, but also we're going to put it on that residual area of the old gas that you see on the drain pipe as well. All right, guys, as we put these turbocharger bolts back on, the ones that hold the oil drain tube, just putting a little bit of high temperature anti-seize, which is actually recommended in the GM service manual for any of the bolts that attach into the parts of the turbocharger that are going to be exposed to exhaust heat. And so that'll also help ensure that we don't have a problem with this. Now, I don't know if we can show this. I've gotten the screw started on the other side, but I don't know if we are able to show this when I'm trying to line the pipe up. So that I can actually get the screw in and keep the gasket centered. All right, I'm going to have to go under here, just like we came in last time. Hopefully you guys can see. And you'll be able to start this guy by hand with just a few threads to hold him on. And then you can switch to your ratchet wrench. Get him in the rest of the way. Now you might have to take a screwdriver or something and kind of hold the end of this to provide some resistance until you can get it started. Actually, I guess I did not get it threaded on there good enough by hand. You guys get the idea. I'm going to have to get this camera out of the way so I can get in there better and tighten this up. So we'll come back. All right, guys, we got this guy here tightened back in. Now, you know, it is not really easy or maybe even not even possible to get a torque wrench in here, but if you can, it's 19 foot-pounds on these little guys. And then we'll go on the other side. And we can see we've got this guy tightened up as well. So since I can't get the torque wrench in here, I'm, you know, judging it by hand and then going a little bit more because of the anti-seize on there. All right, let's go ahead and button up the bottom now. Guys, here we are with everything in position here. Try to zoom in there. We've got all of our bolts put back in and tightened down. We've got our clamp, our springs, excuse me, our clamps put back on our hose and connected back there. And we've gotten our 2 bolts on the drain pipe attached to the bottom of the turbo tightened up. But in doing all this, I thought I'd also show you, I found another view just kind of by chance here. Right, so you can also see this whole thing from here. So this is how you can get in here. And, you know, when I was telling you I was removing these screws by hand and coming up from this position here, you can also get in here and reach things and have better visibility, I guess is what I was trying to say, while you're doing that. Now, what I also found out is these larger bolts, after they were out, they turned out to be 14 millimeter. And you can actually get, if I can show you, you can actually get a ratchet wrench in here and tighten those guys up and probably even loosen them up. And you can also get a ratchet wrench on these clamps. It turns out to be a 1/4 English to tighten those up because you really don't have a lot of room with the screwdriver. And, you know, in hindsight, that would have been a better way to get some of the stuff off. But, you know, you get it cleaned up, you can see a little bit better. Here on top is that little flange piece I was talking about that the hose rubs up against at the top of the drain pipe coming down. So that shows you probably a much better view, although there's a lot of obstructions in the way, but you can get a lot more tooling in here where you can see what you're doing by coming in from this passenger side. I'm just laying on my back looking up at this point. At this rate, though, we're done. You know, we can't really torque everything, but I'll roll the torque values at the bottom so that you can see them. So if I can turn the camera a little bit this way, trying to see if there's any way to see the whole view, but there's really not. Anyway, if you guys have any comments on the repair, any questions, go ahead and leave them below. If you found this video useful, please hit that like button and think about subscribing. Otherwise, thanks for watching.